Hey, I'm Mike Baccarell, and today we're going to take a look at this really cool Diorio pentatonic scale sequence, as well as a couple methods we can use to take a sequence and expand upon it so we can make it into our own idea. Let's take a look. Before we get started, if you enjoy the video, please be sure to give it a like. It really helps the channel to grow. And if you enjoy this sort of content, I release new jazz guitar lesson videos every single week, so please be sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you can stay up to date on my newest videos. And if you're interested in supporting me further, please consider checking out my Patreon, where I post PDFs for every single lesson video, as well as a weekly jazz solo transcription. For as little as $5 a month, you get access to over 100 lesson PDFs, as well as over 100 solo transcriptions, so there's a ton of stuff to practice. Now let's get started. This scale sequence comes from Diorio's book, Intervallic Designs for Guitar, and it's full of all kinds of really interesting wide interval stuff, and I recommend checking it out if you don't have the book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. This sequence comes out of an E minor pentatonic scale, specifically this position. Whenever I look at scale sequences that come out of the tune upper string pentatonic shapes, I tend to think of them as high notes and low notes from each string. So this pattern starts on an A with our pinky on the 5th fret of the 1st string, and that would be the high note on this position. And then we're going to go down to the low note of the 2nd string, which would be a D, high note of the 3rd string, which would be a B, and then high note of the 2nd string, which would be an E. So this is the first half of our line. Now for the second half, Joe plays the same exact idea down an octave, but the fingering changes quite a bit. So we start here on A again, this time on the low note on our 3rd string. Then we go down to D, which would be on the high note of our 5th string, B, which would be the low note of our 5th string, up to E, which is the low note of our 4th string, and then we end down on A, the note we started on, an octave lower. So here's our full sequence. Now that we have our sequence, let's take a look at some ways we can expand upon it. So the very first thing we could do is move through our different pentatonic positions. So we already have this one. Let's move it up to this shape. So we're doing the same thing. High note on the 1st string, low note on the 2nd string, high note on the 3rd string, high note on the 2nd string. There's our first half. And then low note on the 3rd string, high note on the 5th string, low note on the 5th string, low note on the 4th string, and then ending on our starting note 2 octaves lower. So if we follow that pattern, we end up with that fingering, and we move up to the next position. Which is the same exact fingering we had for our first position, right? Now next position. And then our last position. Okay, so now we have our idea, and we've moved it through different positions. What if we change directions and play it upside down? So we're going to take the same sequence, but we're going to reverse the order. So we had this. Now we're going to turn it upside down. Starting here on A with our pinky on the 5th fret of the 6th string. Then we go to the low note of the 4th string, low note of the 5th string, high note of the 5th string, then the low note of the 3rd string, high note of the 2nd string, high note of the 3rd string, low note of the 2nd string, and then high note of our 1st string. And that's the same pattern, just literally backwards. And of course we can take that through the positions. At this point we got our pattern, we moved it through the positions, and now we've inverted it and turned it upside down. What if we play with the rhythm next? So now we're going to play the same exact pattern, but instead of having 8th notes be our subdivision, we're going to use triplets now. And we see by switching the subdivision, the whole line has a whole different identity now. It feels quite a bit different than it did before. So I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this idea. There's a lot more stuff we could do with an idea like this. Sky's really the limit with what we can do to expand on an idea. But these are three basic ideas we can use whenever we come across a new sequence, ways to make it more interesting for ourselves. Even if we're playing like a simple scale sequence. You know, like groups of 4 through a scale, we can still take these same exact ideas. We can move them through the position. We could invert them. And we could change the subdivision. So these methods can be utilized for any sort of scale sequence in the same way, and you'll get similar results, whether it's a complicated pattern or a really simple pattern. So thanks for checking out today's lesson. Keep practicing. I'll see you next time.